My husband divorced me after I got cancer, then tried to kick me out of the house I paid for. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, my husband told me he'd be there. 2 months later, I came home from chemo to find divorce papers on the kitchen table, and a new woman in my bed. He said I was dead weight, that I was dragging him down. Then he tried to take the house I bought with my pension. But I didn't beg. I didn't break. I let him think I'd disappear, until the court took everything he had and gave it back to the woman he tried to erase. Before I begin, thank you for listening to my story. Let me know in the comments where and what time you're tuning in from. It means more than you know. It reminds me that I'm not alone in this. And if you'd like to share your story with me, feel free to email it. I'll drop my email in the description below. Now let me tell you what really happened. The day the doctor said breast cancer, I didn't cry. I just stared at the little crack in the wall behind her head and nodded like I was watching a documentary about someone else. He was kind. She kept using the word treatable. Early stage. Good odds. I clung to those words like a rope because the one person I thought would catch me if I fell was already slipping away. My husband Gerald barely looked up when I told him. He was working on a proposal at the kitchen table, laptop open, receipts spread out like a battlefield. I stood there with my test results clutched in my hand, my voice steady but small. He sighed before he even responded. So, what's the next step? He asked like I'd told him I needed new tires. Chemo. They want to start soon. He nodded once and said, all right. Let me know what I need to do. But he didn't ask how I felt. Didn't take my hand. Didn't sit with me that night. He slept in the other room just in case. And I told myself he was in shock. That he just didn't know how to process it. But the truth was, the day I became sick was the day I became invisible to the man I'd loved for nearly 30 years. We met young. I was 21 and already teaching 3rd grade. Gerald was 2 years older, just starting his own contracting business. He was loud, charming, full of ideas and promises. I was the steady one. I saved money. Paid bills on time. I built a life with him brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, until we could afford the small but solid house on Ashwood Lane. When Gerald's business hit a wall in his 40s, it was my pension that kept us afloat. I took an early retirement option, 28 years of service in the school district, and used part of the lump sum to pay off our mortgage and renovate the kitchen. He thanked me with flowers, then forgot. That money didn't come from nowhere. It came from skipped vacations, packed lunches, and 1,000 tiny sacrifices. And still, when I got sick, he saw me as a liability. The chemo hit hard. I lost my hair, my appetite, my strength. I tried to smile through it. Tried to keep the house clean, cook when I could, pretend things weren't falling apart. But Gerald grew more distant. He started working late. Coming home after midnight. I stopped asking questions because I was afraid of the answers. 3 months after my first treatment, I came home from the clinic to find a manila envelope on the kitchen table. No note. Just my name in thick block letters. Inside were divorce papers. I sat at the table for hours, staring at them like they were written in another language. When he came home, I asked one question. Why now? He didn't flinch. Didn't stutter. Just shrugged. I can't do this, Ruth. I can't sit around and watch you fall apart. I need to live my life. You mean you need to leave your wife while she's fighting cancer? I mean I need peace, he said. And this isn't peaceful. I wish I'd screamed. Thrown something. I didn't. I just nodded and walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and vomited until my legs gave out. 2 months later, he was remarried. Her name was Tamara. She was 35, wore high heels to the grocery store, and introduced herself to neighbors like she'd always been part of the neighborhood. Gerald didn't even move out. He brought her into the same house I paid for while I was still living there. Yes, I was still there. The divorce wasn't finalized. And even if it had been, my name was on every single document that mattered. The deed. The loan. The bills. My pension had bought that house. Not his business, which hadn't turned a profit in years. Not his charm, which faded the minute I got sick. But that didn't stop him from trying to erase me. Tamara moved in with her fake laughter and designer throw pillows. She repainted the living room without asking. Changed the locks and gave me a new key with a little pink ribbon on it like a favor. I was moved into the guest room. She put a tray of candles and tissues on the nightstand and called it cozy. Gerald started referring to the master bedroom as our space, like I was a tenant. Then one night I overheard him say something I'll never forget. They were in the kitchen laughing over wine and I heard her ask if he ever thought about kids. He chuckled. She couldn't have them. Complications from all the treatments. It was never in the cards. She asked. Ruth. We tried but, well, I guess I didn't want it enough back then. Now it's different. I laid in that guest room, my chest tight, my body sore, and I realized two things at once. First, I was completely and utterly alone. Second, no one was coming to save me. I had no children. No siblings. My parents were long gone. My entire adult life had been about keeping things together for other people. For my students. For Gerald. For the home. And now here I was, 50 years old, bald, sick, and sleeping 10 feet from a man who once promised to love me in sickness and in health. That night I cried harder than I ever had. Not because I lost him, but because I lost the illusion that I ever really had him in the first place. And when the tears dried, I sat up, pulled the papers from my nightstand and reread every page. The deed. The financial disclosures. The pension statements. The contract work I co-signed for. And by the time the sun came up, I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't scared. I was ready. The next morning I got out of bed like it was any other day. I made a pot of tea and sat at the kitchen table while Gerald and Tamara clinked dishes and flirted behind me like I didn't exist. I sipped in silence, but inside something was burning. Every word they said, every step she took in the slippers I bought last Christmas, every smirk he gave when she leaned against him, it all added fuel. Morning, Gerald said flatly as he passed me. He didn't wait for a reply. I looked him dead in the eye. You'll be hearing from my attorney. He blinked, pausing for just a second, just enough for me to see it. That flicker of doubt. That flash of discomfort. Then he smirked. Sure thing, Ruth. I called Denise Harrell the same day. I'd met her once through a church friend who'd said, if a man ever tries to take what's yours, call Denise before you even cry. I didn't cry. I called. Denise listened. I told her about the pension, the down payment, the years I spent paying off the mortgage while Gerald tried to keep his business alive. I told her how Tamara moved in before the divorce was even finalized. I told her about the night he said I couldn't give him children, like I was a broken appliance. Denise didn't flinch. She just said, you've got more than a case. You've got a reckoning. She pulled records from the county clerk, checked the deed, traced every deposit from my pension that went into the mortgage. It was all there. He hadn't even tried to cover it up. He thought I'd just lie down and disappear. Meanwhile, Gerald grew bolder. Tamara started hosting dinners in the house like I wasn't there. They pushed me into silence. Whenever I tried to speak, Gerald would say, don't start, Ruth. You know you're not well. You're right, I said one night. I'm sick. But not stupid. That same week, Tamara removed the last photo of me and Gerald from the hallway wall and replaced it with a watercolor of Paris. I'd never been to Paris. I'd always wanted to go. I paid for that wall. That frame. That house. And they treated me like a ghost. Nurse Evelyn, who'd been assigned to help monitor me through chemo recovery, started coming more often. She'd known Gerald and Tamara from the neighborhood and never liked them. Quietly, she began documenting everything she saw. How Tamara would ignore me during meals, how Gerald would speak about me like I wasn't present, how I was slowly being pushed into a corner of my own home. You should record this, Evelyn said one afternoon while Gerald berated me for leaving dishes in the sink. Every word. Every look. Every time they try to make you feel like you're a guest in your own house. I started writing things down. Dates. Times. Quotes. And I gave them to Denise, who smiled like someone who already knew how this would end. We filed a motion to freeze the property title so Gerald couldn't sell or refinance it out from under me. We attached pension receipts. We added Nurse Evelyn's signed statement. We filed a separate petition for financial abuse and emotional cruelty, citing abandonment during a medical crisis. Gerald found out 2 days later when a real estate agent called and told him the house was legally blocked from any transfer. I was in the living room when it happened. He stormed in waving his phone. What the hell did you do? I looked up calmly. Protected what I paid for. You don't own this house. I do, I said. And soon a judge will make sure you remember that. He turned to Tamara, fuming. She's bluffing. But Tamara didn't look so sure. From that moment on, the mood in the house shifted. Gerald grew meaner, more impatient. Tamara got quieter and I caught her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. The woman who once smiled at me like I was an old couch now eyed me like I was the balm under the floorboards. One night while I was sitting in the guest room wrapping my hair in a scarf, Gerald knocked once and walked in. "You want a war, Ruth?" he asked. I turned and met his eyes. "No. I want peace. And I'll get it, with or without you in the house." He stared at me for a long time then left without another word. The next day Tamara moved some of her things out. Not all, but enough for me to notice. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smirk. I just went into the master bedroom for the first time in months. I stood in the center of the room and looked at the walls. The paint color hadn't changed, but the air felt different. I opened the closet. Half empty. Good. Evelyn came by the next morning and helped me reorganize my medications. She noticed the tension was lower, the volume turned down on whatever performance Gerald and Tamara had been running. I told her about the court dates Denise had secured. I told her Gerald hadn't spoken to me in 3 days. She nodded. "That's the sound of fear, Ruth. It's quiet." I smiled, because for the first time in a long time the silence felt like mine. The court date was set. 3 weeks. Denise said that was fast, but it still felt like a lifetime. I counted the days on a small notepad, each one like a matchstick scratching toward something I wasn't sure would ignite or explode. Gerald barely spoke to me. Tamara had started sleeping elsewhere, either at a friend's or possibly just gone. She'd taken her makeup from the bathroom and the tacky gold vase from the mantel, so I guessed it was permanent. I didn't ask. I didn't care. I spent those weeks moving with a different kind of quiet. Not the quiet of defeat like before, but the kind of quiet that builds pressure. I had fire in me again, though my body still struggled. Chemo doesn't just sap your strength. It takes your breath, your appetite, your hair, your sleep, your sense of control. But it hadn't taken my memory. And I remembered every sacrifice I ever made for Gerald. Every mortgage payment from my pension. Every line I co-signed for. Every year I worked past my prime to make sure we could live comfortably. And now here he was trying to cast me out of the house I built. Denise came over one evening with 2 folders. One was mine, deed copies, pension deposit breakdowns, property tax receipts, and statements from Evelyn. The second was Gerald's. His retirement accounts, business liabilities, and the failed refinancing attempt he tried to sneak through behind my back. "You know what this is?" she said, tapping both folders. "Your voice written down. When they ask what happened, we won't tell them. We'll show them." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From hunger. Not food justice. Evelyn visited more often leading up to the hearing. She brought soup, reorganized my medicine drawer, and reminded me to take deep breaths whenever I looked too stiff. "This stress is poison," she warned. "But you're not built to break." Sometimes I believed her. Other days I was just trying to keep my feet under me. 2 days before court, Gerald made a show of bringing a woman into the house. Not Tamara. Someone new. She wore platform heels and an artificial smile and didn't even acknowledge me sitting in the living room. Gerald laughed too loudly and I could hear him say things like, "This is just temporary, and the old one's almost out." I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just wrote it down in the notebook I kept tucked under my robe. He was trying to provoke me. To make me look unstable before court. Denise had warned me this would happen. But I wouldn't give him the pleasure. The morning of the hearing, I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. My hair was growing back in soft patches. I tied a scarf gently around my head. My skin looked pale, but my eyes, those held the storm. Evelyn drove me. Denise met us on the courthouse steps. I walked slowly but upright. My knees ached. My spine pulled. But I walked in like I belonged in that courtroom because I did. Gerald was already there, sitting with a smug little grin and a lawyer who looked like he had more cologne than credibility. Tamara wasn't with him. I took that as a sign she wanted no part of what was about to unfold. When the judge entered, we all stood. And when the testimonies began, Denise started laying out the bones of the truth. Clear, cold, methodical. "Ruth Langston paid for 80% of the down payment on the property," she said, holding up documents. "These pension withdrawals match each stage of the mortgage process. Her husband, Gerald Langston, contributed inconsistently during the marriage, and attempted to refinance the house without her knowledge. She passed exhibits to the clerk like someone placing cards down in a game she already knew how to win." Then Evelyn testified. She talked about how she'd seen Tamara enter the house while the divorce was still fresh. How Gerald had referred to Ruth as a liability. How Ruth was often left alone during treatment, mocked, and at times denied access to parts of the house. The courtroom was quiet. Gerald shifted in his seat. His lawyer didn't ask many questions. There wasn't much they could refute. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly. Denise offered to speak for me, but I shook my head. I wanted to do this myself. I took the stand, raised my hand, and swore in. The judge asked if I wanted to say anything before questioning began. Yes, I said, my voice hoarse but steady. I want to tell you what happens when someone you love treats you like an expiration date. I looked directly at Gerald. I gave him the best years of my life. I gave him money when he had none. I gave him peace when his business nearly failed. I gave him a home. And when I got sick, when I needed him most, he gave me silence, shame, and divorce papers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. But halfway through the questioning, something shifted inside me. I felt hot, dizzy. My hands trembled as I clutched the side of the witness box. "Are you all right, ma'am?" the judge asked. I tried to nod, but everything was spinning. The room twisted. My knees gave way. The last thing I remember was Evelyn shouting my name and Denise catching me under the arms before everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed 6 hours later. My phone beeped softly. Evelyn sat beside me. Denise stood near the window, phone in hand. "You're okay," Evelyn said. "But your body's telling you to slow down." "What about the hearing?" I asked, barely able to lift my head. Denise smiled gently. "The judge recessed for 48 hours. But I think we made our point." I closed my eyes, exhausted. I had told my truth. And now my body was forcing me to rest. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The hospital room smelled like lemon disinfectant and quiet regret. I lay there blinking at the ceiling, feeling more drained than I'd ever felt. Not from chemo, not from stress, but from everything all at once. My body was aching and my spirit just barely holding on. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. 2 more days until court resumed. 2 more days to get strong enough to sit up and look that man in the eyes again. Evelyn stayed the night in the chair by the window. Denise came back the next morning with updates. "Gerald's lawyer tried to push for a mistrial," she said flatly, brushing imaginary lint off her sleeve. "Said your collapse proves you're emotionally unstable." Judge shut it down. Hard. I nodded slowly. Of course he did. He's unraveling, Ruth. You just keep healing. I've got the paperwork lined up. The records are airtight. If all you do is show up on your feet, we'll finish this. 2 days later, I did just that. I walked into that courtroom slower than before, but steadier. Evelyn walked behind me. Denise stood at my side like a shield. Gerald looked surprised to see me. I could tell by the way he sat back in his chair, his hands folded too tightly in his lap. The judge entered. The hearing resumed. Gerald's lawyer tried to spin his narrative. Claimed Ruth wasn't forced out, she was free to leave any time. Claimed Gerald had offered her options, like moving in with family. Claimed he'd supported her for years, and deserved to rebuild his life. Denise waited. Then she stood, adjusted her glasses, and opened a final folder. "Your Honor," she said, "Mr. Langston claims financial contribution. Let's look at the actual records. Here are 22 years of mortgage payments, nearly all pulled directly from Mrs. Langston's pension account. Here are home repairs charged to her name. Property taxes paid from her early retirement settlement. He never added to the title. Never reimbursed a cent. And while she was undergoing chemotherapy, he moved another woman into the house she paid for." The judge's eyebrows lifted. Denise let the silence speak. She added, "We're also filing for restitution, emotional distress, and a lien on Mr. Langston's retirement account equal to the amount drained from hers." Gerald finally snapped. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "I built that life too." "You built your business while she kept the house afloat," Denise countered. "You left her when she was vulnerable. You humiliated her. And now you're offended that she stood back up." The judge sighed, leaned forward, and said, "Mr. Langston, you may want to let your counsel speak on your behalf from here on out." The rest was a blur of paperwork, signatures, and closing statements. But I remember the ruling. The judge granted me full legal ownership of the house. He awarded $62,000 in financial restitution to be drawn directly from Gerald's retirement fund over the next 3 years. He cited unconscionable conduct during a medical crisis, and added, "This court recognizes not only the financial abuse, but the emotional cruelty inflicted upon the plaintiff during one of the most vulnerable chapters of her life." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there, still and silent, while Gerald turned pale and his lawyer whispered something about an appeal he wouldn't be able to afford. Tamara wasn't in court that day, but she was gone from the house the next morning. All her perfume bottles, her framed Paris prints, her designer throw pillows, all of it vanished like a passing storm that left only wreckage behind. Gerald stayed behind for 2 more days. Moved slowly, quietly, like he couldn't quite believe what had happened. He didn't speak to me. He didn't look at me. And I didn't offer a single word. When I returned home from the final court hearing, there was a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. A list of his must-takes, some tools, clothes, and old photo album. I let him have it. I didn't need anything from that life but the walls. The next morning I stood in the doorway and watched him load the last box into the back of his truck. He looked older, smaller, lost. He paused at the driver's side door. "Back. Take care of yourself, Ruth," he said. I didn't answer. I just stepped inside and closed the door. Then I changed the locks. The house was mine again. But it didn't feel like mine, not yet. It still smelled like betrayal. Still echoed with the sharpness of Tamara's heels and the bitter cold of Gerald's silence. So I opened every window. I aired it out. I moved the bed back into the master bedroom. Repainted the kitchen. Hung wind chimes on the back porch. That afternoon I brewed tea and sat by the window. Denise called to check in. Evelyn stopped by with flowers. The court order was finalized. I now had the house, compensation, and peace. Gerald had no rights, no power, and soon no address. I didn't celebrate. But for the first time in a long while I let myself exhale fully. The weight was lifting. I was tired, yes, but I was still standing. The next 2 weeks moved slowly, like thick syrup sliding down the side of a glass. I was recovering from everything at once. Radiation, stress, court, betrayal. But even in the fatigue something had changed. For the first time in nearly a year I woke up without dread sitting on my chest. The house was finally quiet in the right way. No more Gerald pacing down the hallway barking into his phone. No more Tamara's perfumes choking the air. No more cold silences over dinner, or the sound of a front door slamming after another one of their date nights. It was just me. Me and the old wooden floors I once paid to refinish. Me and the roof I patched with my pension. Me and the walls that heard everything and still stood. I spent my mornings by the kitchen window. The same window I used to clean while watching Gerald mow the lawn and wave at neighbors like he was someone's idea of a decent man. I sipped tea and looked at the trees, remembering the woman I used to be before cancer, before betrayal. She was still there. Bruised. But breathing. Evelyn stopped by with soup and a new potted plant. Denise called to confirm the court transfer had been recorded. "The house is legally yours now, Ruth. No appeals. No loopholes. It's done." I didn't know what to say. So I just whispered, "Thank you," and sat with it. But Gerald wasn't done. 3 days later his name flashed on my phone screen. I stared at it for nearly a minute before declining the call. Then he tried again the next day. And the next. I didn't answer until the 5th attempt. Curiosity got the better of me and part of me wanted to hear how low he'd go. "Ruth," he said when I finally picked up, I needed to talk to you." I didn't speak. "I'm not calling to fight. I know what I did. I know I messed up." So I said nothing. "I lost everything," he said, his voice cracking a little. "Tamara's gone. Business is not doing great. I've been staying in a friend's spare room. Just, everything's falling apart." I let the silence stretch because I wanted him to sit in it. To hear what abandonment sounds like on the other end. "I've been thinking about you," he continued. "About us. About the years. Maybe if we could talk like adults. Maybe even," he hesitated, "start over." I closed my eyes. Not out of emotion but because the audacity felt loud. "Start over." I repeated softly. "If you wanted. I mean, we had good times, didn't we? Maybe you and I could meet for dinner. Just talk." And there was that same voice that once said he needed peace. That same man who once called me dead weight. now asking to sit at my table again, like I hadn't fought for every square foot of that house while he tried to replace me with someone younger and louder and shinier. No, I said. Come, final. Ruth, please. You left me when I was sick, Gerald. You abandoned me at the moment I needed someone the most. And now that you're the one left out in the cold, you think we're even. I just want to fix things. You can't fix what you broke on purpose. There was silence on his end. I imagined him sitting on the edge of someone else's bed, holding a phone he could no longer use to control anything. You said I was a burden, I said. Now you get to carry that title for a while. And I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant either. Just clean. The kind of clean that comes after a storm clears and all you can hear is your own breath. That weekend I opened every window again and let the wind move through the house like it was rewriting the air. I spent a day in the garden. Evelyn helped me prune the roses that Tamara once called too old-fashioned. I bought new sheets, painted the guest room, and finally took the last of Gerald's things to the curb. I didn't burn them. I didn't slash or smash anything. I just let the garbage collectors carry it all away like any other kind of waste. A few days later, I got a letter from the utility company addressed to Gerald. Unpaid bills forwarded from his new address. I didn't open it. Just scrawled return to sender, and dropped it in the mailbox. I didn't owe him understanding anymore. I didn't owe him my time. With the money I was awarded from the court, I replaced the old refrigerator, paid off my small car loan, and donated to a local organization that helps single women facing eviction after divorce. The director hugged me when I brought in the check. She didn't ask for my story, but I told it anyway. You'd be amazed, she said, how many women come in here with cancer in their body and a man who treated them like the disease. I smiled. Then make sure this helps the next one. It rained the next morning. I watched the drops slide down the windows from my recliner. The house was warm, safe, and even though my body was still healing and I had scars I didn't ask for, I felt something else return. Not peace. Not yet. But possibility. The kind that only comes after you've been broken, stitched together again, and realized your reflection still belongs to you. Spring came slowly that year, like the earth was learning how to breathe again, just like me. The garden began to bloom in shades of deep pink and soft lavender, the same colors I used to braid into my hair when I was younger. Now that hair was starting to grow back, short and stubborn like the woman I'd become. The house felt different now. Not haunted. Not hollow. But healed. My scent had returned to the walls. My quiet, my rhythm, my little routines. I lit candles in the evening, played old soul music as I cooked, and danced in the kitchen some nights when no one was watching, because I could. My strength was still coming back, but I was upright. Walking. Cleaning. Breathing without pain. And most importantly, living on my terms. A few neighbors who had seen Gerald come and go for years finally started talking again. One of them brought over banana bread and said, "We weren't sure what happened, but we're glad you're still here." I just smiled and said thank you. I didn't need them to know the full story. The house spoke for itself. One morning, Evelyn dropped by to bring me groceries and sit for tea. We sat on the back porch, the sun brushing the top of the fence as we sipped quietly. "You look good," she said. "I feel you're real," I replied. "Not better. No, not yet. But real is enough for now." She nodded. "He called again last week. He left a message with the front desk at the clinic trying to see if I'd tell you." I didn't even flinch. What did he want? Same thing he always wants. A way back. I looked out over the yard. Back to what? There's nothing here for him anymore. Nothing left for me to give. That's what I told the nurse to tell him. We clinked our mugs like glasses and she smiled. That night, after Evelyn left, I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The stove clicked quietly, warming up my tea. The fridge hummed. I could hear the wind chimes out back. It was all so still but not empty. It was mine. Then my phone rang. Blocked number. I knew who it was before I even picked it up. I let it ring. Let it fill the room with its sharp, pathetic sound. And when I finally answered, I said nothing. "Ruth." His voice came through, small and strained. "I didn't think you'd answer. So I didn't speak. I've been thinking about everything. About what we had. About what I lost. I know I did wrong. I know I left when I should have stayed. But I miss you. I miss us." "There is no us," I said calmly. "I was scared, Ruth. I didn't know how to handle your illness. But I thought I couldn't be what you needed. No, I said. You just didn't want to be. He was quiet on the other end. I let him sit in it. I can make things right, he tried again. Maybe if we talk, if we meet. I cut him off. You let another woman sleep in the bed I made. You watched me cry from the guest room while you told her about the children I could never give you. You called me a burden. A weight. Then you tried to take the very house I built with my life savings. And now you want to come back. I've changed, he said weakly. You have to believe that. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I just said the one thing I'd held for months. I survived breast cancer, Gerald. But I had to survive you first. Then I hung up. Not angrily. Just finally. And I stood in the kitchen, letting the silence settle like fresh snow. That weekend I bought myself new bedsheets. Not out of need, but because I wanted the kind with soft lilac stitching. Something that felt like a reward. I cooked a full breakfast for myself on Sunday morning and sat by the window as the sun rose through the curtains. I didn't think about him. I didn't wonder where he was staying now, or who else he might be trying to charm. That chapter was closed, burned, and buried. Instead, I pulled out the notebook I kept tucked beside the kettle. The one where I now wrote thoughts, prayers, and reminders that I was still here. And on the last page I wrote, he tried to erase me when I was sick. But I lived. I healed. And now the only thing he owns is regret. I smiled at it. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. Then I tucked it away, poured myself another cup of tea, and opened the window just a little wider. The world was still turning. And this time I was turning with it. Alone, yes, but whole, strong, and finally free.